Have you ever started a new project, maybe a workout plan, learning a new skill, or even just trying to stick to a morning routine and notice something funny about yourself? At first, you're excited, full of energy, convinced this time it'll stick. But then, a week in, you start feeling tired, distracted. Suddenly, scrolling social media seems way more appealing than doing that thing you promised yourself you'd do. You might even ask, why can't I just push through? Why do I start things and then fade away? Chances are you're bumping up against a distinction psychologists have been studying for decades: the difference between internal motivation and external motivation. You see, we humans often assume that if we really care about something, we'll just do it. That passion, that drive, it should be enough. But here's the twist psychology throws at us. Our brains aren't wired to operate purely on willpower. Not all motivation is created equal, and where it comes from, inside you or from outside forces, changes everything about how we act, persist, and feel about ourselves. Let's imagine a scenario. Picture two people training for a marathon. One runs because their coach tells them they must hit certain weekly targets. There's praise, there's guilt if they skip, and maybe even a little public recognition if they succeed. That's external motivation at work, pushing behavior through rewards and consequences. Now, the other runner wakes up before dawn because running gives them a sense of peace. It clears their mind. They enjoy the rhythm of their feet hitting the pavement, the air in their lungs, the quiet hours before the city wakes. That's internal motivation. They do it for the sheer satisfaction it brings, not because anyone else is watching or judging. You might already be sensing why this matters. Internal motivation is like having a self-charged battery. External motivation is more like plugging into someone else's outlet. When the plug gets pulled or the reward disappears, you're suddenly running on empty. Research by Dacey and Ryan, pioneers of self-determination theory, shows that people who operate from internal motivation not only persist longer in tasks, but also experience greater satisfaction and well-being. Their actions feel like extensions of themselves, not obligations imposed from outside. But here's the catch. Internal motivation isn't a magical switch you flip. It's cultivated, often in tiny, almost invisible ways. Sometimes it begins with curiosity. Think back to a time when you learned something just because it fascinated you. Maybe it was astronomy, maybe cooking, maybe trying to understand why your dog tilts its head at certain sounds. That spark, the "I want to know this because it excites me," that's the root of internal motivation. Notice I didn't say you have to feel excited all the time. Motivation is messy. It waxes and wanes. But curiosity, even in small doses, can be a compass pointing you towards sustained internal drive. Another fascinating aspect is how autonomy fuels internal motivation. Autonomy doesn't necessarily mean doing whatever you want all the time. It's about feeling a sense of ownership over your choices, even small ones. Studies show that when people feel controlled or pressured, their internal motivation drops, sometimes dramatically. Think about school or work projects. When your ideas are ignored or decisions are dictated from above, you might still complete the task, but your enthusiasm? Gone. Compare that to a time you were allowed to craft your own solution, choose your own method, or explore your own ideas. Suddenly, energy and focus show up in ways you didn't even realize were possible. And yet, here's the irony. Many of us chase external motivation without realizing it. Likes, recognition, bonuses, or even avoiding criticism can be powerful drivers. Don't get me wrong, they're not inherently bad. They can get us moving, especially when habits or routines are in their infancy. But relying solely on them is like building a house on sand. It can hold up for a while, but the moment circumstances change, collapse is inevitable. True internal motivation, the kind that sustains over years, doesn't hinge on applause or acknowledgement. It comes from aligning your actions with your values, interests, and authentic self. Now, let's tackle a tricky question.
What if you're not naturally internally motivated? Maybe you've tried pursuing a goal and felt nothing but frustration or boredom. Does that mean you're doomed to rely on external nudges forever? Absolutely not. Neuroscience actually gives us hope here. Your brain is plastic. It can change, grow, and reorganize in response to experience. One key strategy psychologists suggest is reframing tasks to connect them to your intrinsic interests. Say you're trying to exercise but hate traditional gyms. Maybe instead of focusing on the must-work-out mindset, you frame it as a way to explore nature, listen to your favorite podcast uninterrupted, or improve your mental clarity. Suddenly, the activity transforms from obligation to personal enrichment. There's also something called the flow state, which is closely linked to internal motivation. Remember that feeling when you're so absorbed in a task that hours disappear without you noticing? That's flow, and it thrives when challenges are balanced with your skill level and when the activity itself is inherently rewarding. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, the psychologist who coined the term, observed that people experience the deepest satisfaction when they're doing things for their own sake, not for a reward. It's almost as if the brain is saying, "This is mine. I choose this, and I'm fully alive in it." But let's be honest, internal motivation doesn't mean constant happiness or effortless achievement. There are days when even the most intrinsically driven people feel resistance. It's not a flaw, it's human. The key difference is that internally motivated individuals tend to return to their activities even after a setback, because the source of drive is embedded in their own sense of purpose, not in fleeting external incentives. It's resilient, like a deep river that keeps flowing, even when the surface looks turbulent. There's a subtle, almost philosophical lesson here, too. Internal motivation nudges us towards a life that feels authentically ours. It encourages self-reflection. What do I truly care about? What do I find rewarding simply because it aligns with my values or sparks my curiosity? And perhaps most importantly, it frees us from the trap of comparison. When we're externally motivated, we often measure success against others, likes, recognition, bonuses. Internal motivation shifts the lens inward. Progress becomes about alignment with ourselves rather than approval from the world. So, how do you cultivate it? Start small. Notice what draws your attention naturally. Pay attention to moments when time seems to disappear because you're engrossed in an activity. Reflect on why those moments matter to you. Experiment with small choices that give you a sense of control, and gradually, as your autonomy and curiosity expand, internal motivation strengthens. It's like tending a garden. You can't make a plant grow overnight, but with care, sunlight, and patience, it flourishes. By now, you might be thinking, okay, this sounds good in theory, but life is messy. What if I fail? And here's the empathetic truth. Failure is part of internal motivation too. In fact, it often reinforces it. When you pursue something because it genuinely matters to you, setbacks become opportunities for learning, experimentation, and growth. You're not quitting because the external world says so. You're adapting because your own curiosity and values guide you. That's a subtle but profound difference. Imagine living with that mindset, not every day being driven by likes, deadlines, or pressure, but by your own sense of meaning. That doesn't mean life suddenly becomes effortless or that you'll never face laziness or doubt. It means the foundation beneath your actions is sturdier, more resilient, and deeply satisfying. And over time, that internal drive can transform not just your productivity, but your entire sense of well-being, self-esteem, and purpose. So, here's a little challenge for you. Tomorrow, pick one task, one activity, or one tiny goal. Before doing it, pause and ask yourself, why am I doing this? Do I want it for myself or because someone else expects it? Reflect honestly, and then try to connect that task to something intrinsically meaningful. Maybe it's your curiosity. Maybe it's your sense of mastery. Maybe it's simply the joy of doing it. Notice how your energy, focus, and satisfaction shift. That small step could be the start of a profound change in how you engage with the world. At the end of the day, understanding internal motivation isn't just about productivity hacks or personal efficiency. It's about reclaiming agency in your own life. It's about realizing that the spark that drives you doesn't have to come from outside. It can come from within. And once you start noticing it, nurturing it, and following it, even in tiny ways, you start to live a life that feels not just accomplished, but genuinely yours. So, take a moment today. Reflect, experiment, and notice where your true motivation lies. Comment below what you discover. It's fascinating to see how different people tap into their internal drive. And if this video sparked a little curiosity, a little reflection, maybe even a little shift in how you think about motivation, consider subscribing.